morning, everybody. Welcome to our LA County Library virtual event, Creative Career Paths. I'm Caroline Chang, Arts Program Manager at LA County Library, and I will be your host today. And in today's program is a part of a series exploring careers in the entertainment, film, TV, and media industries. And in today's program, director and producer Kimberly Browning will have a conversation with Colleen Fitzpatrick to talk about music creative production. So I'm going to start out by introducing our presenters today, but while I'm doing that, we love to learn a little bit more about you. So please say hello to us in the chat and share with us what you're hoping to get out of the conversation today. So we know a little bit more about what we can talk about during the conversation. So to start, I'd like to introduce Kimberly Browning, who will be moderating our conversation. Kimberly is a filmmaker based in LA and is the founder and festival director of the Hollywood Shorts Film Festival, which launched in 1998. She is an associate short film programmer at Tribeca Film Festival and a senior programmer at Catalyst Content Festival. She has been the executive producer of HBO Access since 2015 and is now part of the new Warner Media Access programs team, developing emerging writers and directors in episodic television. And then we also have our lovely guest speaker today, Colleen Fitzpatrick, who has worked in many areas within the music industry as an artist, writer, producer, and currently works in the music creative production arm at Netflix, helping productions creatively execute music needs. Her day-to-day tasks include a close relationship with creative partners to recommend composers, music supervisors, songwriters, music directors, and any related personnel. I'm sure she'll talk more about it later in detail. In addition to close oversight over budgets and licensed music needs, all on-camera performances, as well as facilitating creative music notes. The music creative production arm can work on heavy music shows like Julie and the Phantoms, to more source-driven shows like Black AF, to the awarding live score of The Queen's Gambit and everything in between. So with that, I will hand this over to Kimberly to start us off.
Thank you, Caroline. Thanks, everybody, for joining us this morning. We're so excited, Colleen, to get to talk to you. There's such a wide array of opportunities in the music space in film and television, and the job you have now just touches on so many of those across the platform because Netflix is making so many different types of shows. So having your expertise and your insights going to be so great for our audience today. So we'd love to start with just hearing about how you started. What was your first yes? What was your first step into your music career?
Well, what's interesting? I mean, I started as an artist and started as a singer, a pretty mediocre bass player, and a songwriter. And so my first yes was auditioning for a local band, to be honest, in New York City. And I got my first taste of writing with that band and working with them. And then we ultimately got signed. And what that meant was I got signed by a major label and I was able to put out records and make videos and tour. And then the band folded. We didn't hit it big, like so many. And I regrouped and I went out as a solo artist. And I performed for many years as the artist Vitamin C and wrote lots of songs. And then ultimately, I realized that my passion laid in writing and producing and the behind the scenes aspect of it. So I began positioning myself to do more behind the scenes work. And I had a production company and I developed artists and I wrote songs for other people. And I did all kinds of crazy things, both successful and unsuccessful within that. And then ultimately I started going into the corporate world. And I took the experience that I had as an entrepreneur, working in all these different areas, and I sort of synthesized them into a job. And I had success in the kids and family space initially. And so that's kind of where I got my sort of, first big corporate job, which was at Nickelodeon, where I was for a long time, overseeing original music. And then I joined Netflix.
That's amazing. So tell us a little bit about your day to day. Tell us about your job and how does it change from day to day? and then talk a little bit about what skill sets you had as a musician and a performer that lent you to have such a important job.
Well, my day to day is never static. It changes all the time. And that's one of the things that I very much love about my job. And it was similar also at Nickelodeon. The we touch so many aspects in the music creative production arm. So I'm specifically a music creative, and I work with people that also do music production. So that's more of the nuts and bolts, and the booking the studio, the budgets, uh, forecasting on like, oh, we have this movie or that series coming up in 2 years, and it's going to be a big score, and we may need to book that studio in London or something. And my job specifically day to day is to understand the creative on any given series. So I work really closely with EPs, executive producers. I work closely with songwriters. I work very closely with agents. I work closely with, composers and music supervisors. So the core aspect of my job is to figure out what the music needs are on a show creatively, discuss them with the external team and then my internal team, and then synthesize those ideas to make sure we're all on the same page, and then recommend options and provide suggestions for music composers, for music supervisors. And then ultimately it's the show's decision and it's the executive producer's decision. I think that sometimes there's this misnomer that people are sitting in a corporate office and making the decision, but we at Netflix are, incredibly creator driven. And ultimately we want the best for the show. So some people come and they know exactly who they want. They've worked with a person for a long time. In those instances, I still provide options because I see that my job is to broaden the scope of everyone's opportunities and awareness. And so what I mean by that is sometimes people work with the same folks for many, many years. There's no harm in introducing them to new people. There's no harm in sharing a different way of working.
Sorry,
Oops.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
And my phone just went off. On my watch. That's okay, Siri. You don't have to hear me. That was amazing. So anyway, so I always, and part of that is also about wanting to move the needle in an area that I feel is very important to me personally, but also to our company, which is having greater representation across all of our shows, because we want shows that look like our audience, and we want people on camera that look like our audience, but we want people behind the scenes that look like our audience as well. And yeah, so.
TV and film work a little bit differently in terms of the workflow of the creative process, and where EPs more have the creative on episodic, and the director and the composer together really craft what the language musically is going to be. So can you talk a little bit about how that you distinguish the type of relationship building you do has to be different so that you're prepared for either format you guys are working with? And now Netflix is doing a lot more animation, which is a whole different musical process. So and many people in your position at other places don't get that wide bandwidth, right? There, many people are just doing this one type of show. I do half-hour comedies at NBC. Here's my stable of music jingle people, the guys that are doing the bumpers and the stingers. And then, right. And then you've got the, which show is Hans Zimmer going to agree to work on this year, and composing this big epic Oscar level score for this big, huge film with a big, huge director. And you have to know all of that. And so how has working at Netflix allowed you to expand your own relationship building and knowledge base, and, how's it changed for you?
Well, that's a really good point. I mean, when I started, I came in to look after both animation and live action, primarily in the kids and family space. So I was doing a very broad, job. And as we've grown, it has become a little bit more singularly focused on particular styles of shows. But that doesn't mean within your particular focus, there isn't a wide variety. So I'm in live action now, but I work on shows that do have music, like source music. So things that are about, say, a band or something. But I also work on a big score that is, recorded with live players in Budapest or in London or in Tennessee, and honestly, everything in between. Then there's also just the more straight ahead half hour or 1 hour shows that require a lot of curation and music needle drops, we call them.
Yeah.
So where it's changed for me is that Nickelodeon was kids and family. So the stuff that I'm working on now is a lot more, it's broader. I do everything from 4 quad, which is from 6 to 60 or 6 to 80 or whatever that expression is, right?
Yeah.
And then I work on things for adults specifically, or things that are big fantasy plays, or things that are, so it has completely opened up my world to a larger breadth of content, which has been very exciting, because I never had an opportunity to really do a big score in a different country. When I was at Nickelodeon, our content didn't support that. We didn't need it. So then you come across something or someone who has a very specific vision for a show. Like I'm working on something now, that is going to be epic. It's going to be really big and it's going to be epic and big when it needs to be, quiet when it also needs to be. It's going to pull from all different types of Pan-Asian elements. And so these are things that are really specific to the content. It's about what the show needs. It's not like about my choice. And I want to be really clear that because of the volume, my job has changed from doing a lot of this work to overseeing the people that do it. So hiring the music supervisor, hiring the composer. I'm not actually composing anymore. I'm not actually songwriting anymore, nor am I music curating. But what I am doing is watching the creative unfold and starting with that little kernel of like, hey, I want this to be, like Hans Zimmer meets, like some type of Bhangra, and I have to figure out how to make that work. And I don't know of anyone. But wait, I also want a fair amount of K-pop in there. And
Right.
I think we should make sure it's top 40 friendly because we want this audience. And so, and another really interesting aspect of my job now is that we are a global company. And that is, Viacom and all of these amazing studios are also global companies, but there's an emphasis, particularly in my world now, to really to think of it as a global property. I feel like, and that may be just representative of a changing, audience, changing time. But I often think now, hey, how can we put some international flavor or representation into a show so that it's appealing? If there's a character that's from a specific place, she should be listening to something that she would like, as opposed to something that I would like. You know what I mean?
Right. That's so incredible how the streamers have really pushed that opportunity, and I love the way you're talking about it, is that you're somebody who's creating opportunity and employment for a lot more people than this business used to accommodate. So let's talk a little bit about people who are just starting into thinking about a career in some sort of music part of film and television. What are those jobs that are truly entry level or will lead to, what are the avenues or different departments? What are some of those job titles and that need our voices and our own authentic creators? It's not a room of 5 guys over at Eastwind Studios that knows all music of all places. Now there are opportunities for a female composer from Bangladesh in a different way. And I think the business is approaching it in a different way. And it sounds like you have the opportunity to not have to battle in the same way. So talk about some of those departments and some of those jobs. then what's the entry point? And then maybe we could evolve to music onboarding versus those who love music but don't necessarily come from a performer space. I think there's so many great opportunities in engineering and mixing, and people with great ears can be really successful in this business. And I don't think people think about that there's an open door there.
Well, that's a really good point. I think that there's no one path to a job like mine. I mean, there are many people who do what I do, and they've all come from it from a different place. And that could be anything from, a legal background that has morphed into a more creative background. It comes from an actual
business affairs, and you got to do contracts for all these people that are getting hired.
Yep. It could be, from, like you said, an artist who comes in. So the basic breakdown of jobs is, there's music supervision. So there are music supervisors, and very often they all need and have music coordinators. And that's a great way to get into the business. The music coordinators work and support the music supervisors who work on our shows. And they're the ones that are choosing needle drops, and in some instances helping me or helping the EPs decide on composers. They also cover all kinds of on-camera music needs. So if you have a show, let's say, that has a band playing, they have to take care of all the logistics around that. But this is what people don't even realize. Even when you have a character singing along with the radio, that's considered an on-camera, and you need to do clearances, and you need to have rights secured. And so that leads me into something called music clearance, and there are music clearance specialists. There are clearance consultants that usually a music supervisor does both. They do the creative and the clearance, but occasionally you'll get someone who is more creative and all they want to do is do ideation and kind of come up with the curation aspect of it. And they hire a music clearance person, and that person is responsible for clearing what we call two sides. They have to clear the publishing of a song and also the master, which is, the master pressing of the song. The physical song.
From anybody from legal background or contracts background could entry point to there, or that's a great skill set to know, just because it's real contract and negotiating work.
Yes, and that's actually it's about rights fundamentally, but it's also really about relationships. It's about relationships with publishers, with licensors, with songwriters. It's a really relationship driven business because it's about communicating the going market rate on a lot of things and figuring out if a budget is, too high or too low, and, how to make that work. And ping ponging off of that, I think there's also, business affairs attorneys. We call them BLAM, business legal. I don't know what business legal affairs for music, right? So, and they do all the contracts with the music supervisors. They contract the composers. And if there's an original song or if there are specific music needs, our music legal team handles that. In addition, there are composers that work on the music for any given show, and composers often have assistants within their own system, and that's a really important job. And there's two different types of assistants. Sometimes they're writers, but there's also production assistants, and those are the people that are responsible for figuring out again, the naming conventions and the mechanics behind a lot of, the stuff that we don't see, getting the files to a music editor, for example, which will be my next, or booking studios on behalf of the composer. So there's like two different types of jobs within that. And then there are composers that have apprentices that are very, large scale composers working on a lot of projects, and they work with a team. Which is also an incredible way to break in if you're hoping to be a composer and really competitive in that space. I tend to, and this is not exclusive, but I tend to gravitate toward people that have worked underneath amazing people. And the reason for that is because they understand the pace of a show. They understand our production timelines. They understand how to talk about notes, how to receive feedback about notes, because that's a hurdle I think is worth talking about. That as an artist, and I can totally relate to this. As an artist, we're very creative and we're very sensitive about what we create. But the ultimate job, most of the time, is serving the needs of the show. It very rarely is serving your needs. There are occasions where you have an EP that says, oh, just, run, figure out Mr. Composer, Mrs. Composer, whatever you want to do, like make it amazing. But most of the time, it's about serving what's on the page and serving what's in the mind, right? For that particular project. And people get upset when it's not what they imagined. And I can think of a couple really good examples where even with music supervisors, that's happened. They put together a playlist for what they thought the show should be. And the EP is like, meh, not there yet. I think I need you to go back and find something different. And I'm thinking of one supervisor in particular who grew very frustrated by the process of, having to continually come up with ideas and not nail it. And this particular woman felt like this was the direction the show should go in. And it wasn't the direction that other people wanted. So not personalizing and being open to that communication. So that's why it's absolutely, imperative that you learn that sort of behavior.
I think it is an important personality characteristic, because in these parts of the job, we have it on the production side as well. If you get personally attached to how people are responding to you and what you think, then you're not there for the show or the director or the EP, and you're not getting it. And so, and there are some personality types that don't function as well in that space. And that's a really great note to know that if you're great at being able to do things like that and evolve and be on the adventure of discovering together what this could be, and you don't get personally attached to it, it's such a critical component. I've been in situations where, a lot of times, like you said, composers are sent and they go away for 2 months or 3 months and they do all the score and it comes back in. And when you lay it in, it just doesn't fit, doesn't work. But there's no way as an artist that you don't emotionally get connected and invested in your interpretation. And so it can be a really difficult psychological and emotional journey when the director rejects, there's some big famous movies out there, and I'll let you guys Google those anecdotes of big, huge, famous composers creating wall-to-wall music and it getting rejected and a whole new process had to start. And it's unbelievable when it happens, but it happens all the time.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It happens all the time, and it's, it just is what it is. But so getting back to the list of jobs, I think along those lines are a really important job, music editor. Generally, music editors are hired by the post team, but sometimes composers have preferred music editors. Sometimes showrunners even have preferred music editors, particularly if they have a lot of experience in like doing musicals or they want things cut a certain way. So specifically what the music editor does is they lay in the music against picture. And that's a pretty important job because it can mean anything from just like where it fits specifically against what you're seeing, but also smoothing the transitions, dynamics, working with the mixers to figure out the dynamics, pulling stems, like manipulating. And there's two fundamental types of editors. There's some of them lean more on the production side of things, so they can manipulate stems, which is not always great for the composers. Like some people can't stand that, but others are just better at like placement and moving things around and really having an understanding of when a scene should play dry, and when they shouldn't. And we'll talk about the process of how things go in a second. But so music editor's big, and then I would say
before you move forward, what's the background of music editors? Where do they tend to come from? Do they have to be musicians? Are they editors? Do they come from sound mixing? Where do you find that music editors, what basic knowledge base do you need to pursue that line?
I mean, clearly there's a technical skill set there that requires editing. There's also, it is super, I find that the best music editors are musicians at
Right.
heart, you know? I mean, it doesn't mean they're virtuosos, but they understand what instruments sound like and how to manipulate sound. Yeah. And then, you know, I do think I've seen music supervisors become editors. I've seen composers switch into being music editors. I think there are also editors that
Yeah.
understand music. And so I think it's kind of varied. I'm not an expert in that space. So,
But you don't necessarily have to be an avid or premier expert. If you have the musical skills, there might be lanes where you could learn that or have a team that did more of the tech if you have that artistic ability.
yeah, I mean, well, I think you have to learn how to do the technical side of it because that's
Ah,
at the core of that job. So again, uh sometimes on the big shows there's assistant music editors and on films and stuff, and if that's an interest, I would once again recommend like apprenticing for a music editor or assisting, and you see how the sausage is made. And you know what I mean, as opposed to just presenting the sausage, you see it. And so that's super important. I think there's a big component that in the music business that people don't think about, which is, you know, the creation of original songs and commercial music. And so within that group, there's producers, songwriters, music mixers, and I come from a songwriting background, so I can talk a little bit about that. And you know, being a songwriter means different things to different people. I think there are people that really have very tangible skills, like they're amazing players. They can play the guitar, they can play the piano, they can play the drums. Other people are incredible programmers. They can sit down, and that's how a lot of music is made today, both in the orchestral space and for TV, and also, you know, for commercial radio, like computers, you know. Um, and then there are people like me who I wasn't particularly good at anything, but I had a really strong point of view and I had something to say at the time, or I thought I did. It wasn't particularly important, but that is a hallmark of being like an artist, you know, believing that you have something worthwhile to say and a way to say it. And so then there are great singers, you know, so there isn't even one path into that. It's about having for songwriting, for me, there are two aspects. You're either writing on brief, which means somebody tells you, I want a song about an apple tree, and you have to write a song about an apple tree. Or you sit down and you have to come up with whatever you want to say, whatever's important to you at that moment, whatever you think is going to be successful. That might be another motivator. I mean, there's all different ways people write songs. But even when you're like chasing a hit, as people call it, I think there's a point of view that's inherent. I can't underestimate or underemphasize rather the importance of having a point of view. And by the way, in all of these areas, I think the most successful music supervisors start, you know, music supervision is strange because people often say, oh, you know, do you know this band or do you know that band? And no one can know every single band in the world. And there are some supervisors with deep catalog knowledge, deep music knowledge, but not all of them are like that. Some people fall into a particular area. They love hip hop. They know everything about hip hop. Some people know like garage bands from the 60s and they're so into it, and they have, you know, they know which labels to go to, which artists to go to, how to make that music if we need to, the authenticity and representation of that kind of music. And that's really specific. That's a point of view. I mean, and that's kind of the same for composers. There are people that are really good at like action adventure. There are people that lean more intimate, people that lean more indie. So I always tell people to really think about who you are as not just an artist, but as a creative, you know, particularly if you're on the creative side, and think about what that means, because what you bring to the table is what people are going to want to hire you for. You know, are you an expert in a particular genre of music? Do you lean and study and are attracted to a particular type of score that makes sense in your world and you can deliver on that? I don't believe that anyone can be everything. And I get in trouble a lot for this, but I try and find out what people's go-to is. Like, because everyone always says to me, I can do that. I can do that. But as a songwriter, I know when I sat down to write a particular style of song, I was not always great at it. I could write it and I could finish it, but it wasn't as good as the people who really had, you know, a lock on that. Like that was their go-to move.
Yeah.
I knew how to write a certain type of song, but if I wanted to, for example, write a really good country song or a really great hip hop song, I'm not the right person for it.
And that's okay, because you can specialize and still have enough bandwidth that there's enough work out there that you can find. You don't have to be the master of everything, and rarely anybody is.
Rarely. And I also think it's like detracting. I mean, listen, there are jobs that you do have to, like when you work in a commercial music house, for example, you're called upon to do anything at any time. You know, there's this commercial, they want this kind of thing. They want 5 tracks because they don't know if they want it to be like EDM, you know, hip hop, guitar driven, orchestral. And so you have to, you know, figure it out.
Yeah.
And try different things. But what I'm talking about really is understanding what your strengths are.
I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And talk a little bit about, you know, there's an area of music that I think is overlooked. Many songs that are recognizable are truly unaffordable for the budgets that are given to productions. And there's a huge, amazing group of really talented people where I can give them the scene, give them 2 or 3 songs that are the famous songs that are unaffordable, and they are composers who can get in there and craft something that gives the same vibe, or is an homage to that song, but still gives the scene the same vibe, but it's something we can own and is affordable as an original recording. And I don't think people realize how much of that is happening and how much great opportunity there is in the lane of that type of production.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very, very interesting area of the business because it's growing exponentially and worldwide. And most of that stuff, well, there's 2 different ways that happens. There are libraries that aggregate these cues. And sometimes the libraries make deals with composers or, you know, songwriters or musicians or what have you. And sometimes it's like score cue. You know, you'll like when you listen to sometimes a reality show, you might have a library track that's like beat driven underneath. I would say 9 times out of 10, that is not composed directly for that show. It's probably pulled from a library and placed in by a music editor. Then you have songs that are either inspired by, or, you know, they're not sound-alikes, because sound-alikes you get into a very tricky rights situation, but they're in the genre of a particular type of music. And the way I use libraries and the way music supervisors use libraries is to basically, you know, go in, and they have amazing search, and the best ones have amazing search engines. And so you can put in BPM, you can put in stadium, football, sports, you know, epic, chants, and they'll pull and give you a list of tracks, and you listen to them, and then you kind of aggregate them and can, you know, share with production. So on the job side, there are people that work within those production, those libraries that make deals with us, that pitch to us. And then there are the actual people that create the music. Internally at Netflix, we also have a music lab. And the music lab can create original music for us, by us when needed. We more often than not, obviously, go outside and, you know, work with freelancers. But where I have personally used the music lab is for specific editing needs that were really nuanced, or changing out a song in a quick moment, or I couldn't get the rights to something. We exhausted all of our library options. We couldn't find anything, that the creator wasn't happy. And so I was up against a final mix. And so I had someone compose within our music lab a whole bunch of options. so that we could feel secure and covered, but also deliver on, as I said, this particular creative's vision for what they thought the show
So
could
is
be.
that lab 4 or 5 people, a couple of musicians, a producer, and an engineer? Like,
It is. It's small right now, but it wouldn't surprise me if over time, as needs grow, it grows. But it's not dissimilar from like a music house. And there are music houses. The other thing about hiring is that we hire differently based on budget sometimes. I have in my career hired a music house to handle all music needs. And that was more particularly on like a smaller budget show or an animated show where the following needs needed to be met. I needed to have somebody that could, have the little kid actors recorded and comped and smoothed out, and we needed songs written, 3 to 5 songs per episode. They were little songlets, like say in a preschool show. Plus we needed the score music. And it made sense because of the fast moving pace, or simply because of the volume of work, to hire a team, a music house that can do all that, and even sometimes record at their music house. So I've done that. Other times I've hired just a group of songwriters, a separate composer, a separate vocal producer. Other times, as the budget grows, if there's an opportunity to really have, a big composer, I do that. So it completely, that's another aspect of my job, understanding the scope of production against the scope of work and how that fits together.
one of the things I love about this sector of the business is that anywhere that you go in the country or the city you live in, there are jobs. These are not jobs where you have to be in LA or New York. And understanding that every major city has commercial and ad agencies, and that's a lot of business that happens in commercials are very music driven. And I think that people should look at those as open door avenues as well. Can you talk a little bit about your own journey? As you had very different careers as you went along, and you had to make the choice to learn and to find people to teach you. As a musician, when you come up as a performer, sometimes it can be intimidating, the business part, right? I don't know engineering, right? It's just like an actor who starts directing. There's a lot that you have to find ways to learn to find the right ways to learn and to learn what you need. So it seems like digital has changed so much, and there's so much accessibility in your home studio. When I started, you had to rent music space, you had to hire an engineer, and just in early hip hop and making our own cassettes and mixtapes, the DIY of it all has made careers like these and musicians being able to be discovered on digital networks and YouTubes. We're in such a different place than when you and I started out. So can you talk a little bit about the other parts of the business? I think commercials, and are there other local areas that are regional where people could maybe find opportunity to launch into a career-driven music job?
Absolutely. I think music houses are a really good example of that. Again, I'm not an expert in that space, but I have done work, and my husband actually works in the more commercial music business space. And there are ad agencies all around this country and internationally. It is no longer just Madison Avenue in New York City. And the remote nature, even barring the pandemic, like the remote nature of our business started, I would say 15 years ago in earnest, maybe even longer. The first record I did was completely analog. I had to sing every single note as many times as it needed to be sung until I got it right.
Hey, in a studio.
In a studio, like, yes. And then I still have a very clear memory of someone saying, hey, we're going to try, there's this like program. And I knew about, obviously, programming because programming drums, and I was in the pop space. But I still remember when they brought in the first Pro Tools rig into a recording session I was in, which it was gigantic, first of all, and it cost so much money to rent. It was insane. And we were all like, whoa. And I remember the first thing I did, like I sang, and they were like, okay, let's fly that chorus into different areas. And we just sat there. And I remember I looked at it. Now, you could kind of do that with like splicing on edit, that's how it used to be done. But anyway, I digress. But back to your question, yes, the remote nature of work has certainly helped. I have also done big hit songs with people on their laptop. I had someone come in from Canada, and he got off the plane, had his laptop, sat down on my friend's couch, and wrote a hit song. And so you don't have to be in these major cities anymore. And there are ad agencies all around the world. There are production companies all around the world. So that really has become a much more open, space.
And a lot of those companies use libraries as well. I mean, big studios like HBO has deals with like 10 different libraries. So when you first bring an episode in to HBO Post, they give you the links and say, try to find the music in here. And they're big, huge songs in there, but there's also a lot of rip songs and a lot of original that can be customized for your thing. And overall, that's a cost center. They've already invested this money in the rights to all this music. It's all pre-cleared. So you can save a lot of money in your own budget for your show if you can source the music that works for your scene in-house. And there's such a huge whole full teams that keep those, because those libraries publish new music every year. And so they've got an entire landscape of jobs in-house that they're big, but they're all smaller individual composers that are building their own libraries and licensing their own music. The range is so inclusive, and like you said, it's not just going to this one house that maybe has 4 white guys, right? Like, people are making the effort now to find shops and music libraries that are created and organized by creators of that style of music. So there's way more latitude to go find Chinese composers and houses that specialize in reggae by, reggae masters and people who really know it, as opposed to these 4 guys in a corner somewhere in Sherman Oaks.
Absolutely. And I'm going to share something that I think is kind of a funny story. I'm a mom, and I was at a play date, and I was talking to this other mom, and I asked her what she did, and she was like, you're probably going to laugh at me, but I have this like pseudonym, and I do music. And she basically has her own library. She started this late in life, she created a persona for herself. Now, clearly she has the talent to do this, but I think it's interesting. And she licenses her music to film and television and ad agencies. It is not like one of those giant aggregate libraries like APM or something like that. It's her business, and she makes a living based on her needs, and she writes songs creatively. She has this sort of artist persona, but she doesn't have to be Billie Eilish or Katy Perry. She doesn't have to be 17 and signed to a major label. She can be 38 and working in her bedroom or her studio at her house. And, and that particular business for her grew into something that, people liked her music. So then people would call and be like, hey, do you we're looking for a trailer for a Stars, piece, or, a commercial introducing next year's slate, and can you customize something? So she started writing for that kind of
That's amazing.
and I thought it was the coolest thing ever, because I thought I was just going on a play date with a mom. She's not like any, you would not know.
Right.
Right. I mean, and it's not a huge, it's not like APM. It's not like she's trying to conquer the world. She's making a great living at a very specific thing. And that was artist driven for her. It's a choice. But I think it's a very important distinction that there are different levels and different levels of commitment, levels of success, and all are okay,
And all, I think a lot of the old paradigms of elitism and brand chasing also has melted away. I think that a high end distribution network is not going to look their nose like they don't look down their nose at the independent DIY shops anymore. In fact, they're considered to be more unique and more original and more value. And when it's more affordable, that's the trifecta, right? With a network's, exec that you got to keep happy.
Yeah. I mean, it is a changed world. And it's also a changed world in the sense of representation, which we touched on, but I think it's important to think about that. There was really a time where everything was done by a couple people, and
if you weren't Quincy Jones, you were going to have a really hard time as a person of color getting TV music jobs, right? I mean, I can't think of when I was at Disney in the 80s. I can only think of maybe 2 men of color that were working, and there were probably 80 shows on the air, right? They were all, and the guys that I worked with then were all amazing, but they were really very similar in their own backgrounds. They had gone to Berkeley School of Music, or, they were really these high-end guys that were running the TV music shops. And now that's just not the case. It's so exciting.
Oh, it's amazing. It's a real opportunity. I mean, we have a long way to go. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that it's changed. I feel like females are still underrepresented,
especially in the recording arts section, right? And so, when's the last time a woman won a Grammy for engineering or producing? Definitely.
I can tell you something that was interesting. We just recently sponsored and participated in an all-female sync camp. It was one of the first of its kind that I knew of. And I really wanted to make that happen. So all the females, all the producers, all the composers, all the people at the desks behind the equipment were female, trans, female. And it was super important to us. Because usually it's reversed.
I've even heard of anything like that. It's incredible.
But it's small. It's small still. Yeah. We need to keep building, and that's
got to keep building. I was so lucky right before the pandemic to get to work with the first Latina composer, Jermaine. She did Cook the.
Love Jermaine.
I love Jermaine. So we were really, really, really fortunate to get to work with her on a TV pilot. And just being able to spend that time and hearing her own journey, it was still shocking that just the year, her getting TAG, she got hired as a composer on TAG, and TAG was the first, I don't remember but it was the first studio. She was the first studio job that a woman had been given as a composer, and it was insane. And that when she was winning her Grammys, which was really recent, it was the first time somebody of Latino descent had won, and these are such recent breakthroughs that it's shocking. And so how do people that are breaking in now, I can't think of a better time to start, because the industry do you feel the industry is aware and now changing? I think it's the best time for all representation to hit the doors, because there's been a real reckoning about hiring practices.
Yes, absolutely. I want to say that I was also at the ASCAP Awards the year that they brought her out and said that she was the first female to compose, I think it was a romantic comedy in the history of whatever studio that was. And I was like, what?
My jaw dropped on the floor.
Me too.
I was in the room. I was a guest of hers at some panel that they did on the lot right when TAG was about to come out. And I couldn't believe that I was hearing these things. Yeah. So how do we change it? And how do people who are starting their career now be part of that kind of army that's coming up and demanding these opportunities?
We have to keep pushing. We have to constantly be aware of it. And we also have to call people out on it. I mean, that's the honest truth. There's been a lot of, oh yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to work on this over the years. I can tell you in a very small way, some of the stuff that I'm doing. I never put a list together for a composer without someone from the, Indigenous, Black, people of color group, women. There's always a woman on my list, and there's always an emerging composer of any ilk, you know, just somebody who
And it's
is
not the
either
same
like,
5 names that you see over and over.
yes. And that's, you know, it's interesting because a lot of times on the shows that I work with, people have, as I mentioned earlier, someone that they've worked with for a long time. Whether or not they're going to hire that person, I still submit my list. And the reason I do it is it's about awareness. The first step in all of this is letting people be aware that this exists. Because I can't tell you how many times I've heard from, you know, from teams like, oh, well, we'd really like this, but we've looked and there's nobody out there.
All the time. I would have hired a woman DP, but we don't know any. And my job,
right? Yes.
Here's 30. And
So we have some very constructive things that we're doing. You know, we have within our company, we have like a very strong diversity and inclusion team. On the music team, we've been trying to do virtual connections with people. And so what we do is we get a head of department in any group. So it could be an EP, a head writer, you know, and I say a head writer because sometimes the writers are next in line to be running that show, right? Directors. And I've paired them with music supervisors, composers, songwriters, and you just make the connection. It's not a job interview. It's about like, hey, this person is somebody that you should know. And you should know that not only does this person exist, but there's a whole bunch of people like this person that we can be pairing you with. So we do these virtual connections. Then Netflix has also partnered along with many other many other studios with Array, which is Ava DuVernay's company, and she has the Array crew database, which has been incredible. And then we have worked quite a bit with the CDC, which is not the CDC you think, but the Composer Diversity Collective, and that's an amazing collective. I mean, it's a group of people that about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago came together. Michael Abels, Amanda Jones, Chris Bowers.
Yeah. And you guys can find them online. Say the name one more time for us, Colleen, so people can.
Composer Diversity Collective. Yeah. And we've done groups with it. They have a database as well, but we've done mixers with them. And we've hired people from the company. And also just, you know, it's also just not about getting that job. It's about getting jobs. So what do I mean by that? Like I have put, you know, someone that I don't want to name up for 1 million jobs and they've not gotten any of my jobs. But guess what? They've gotten a whole bunch of other jobs, sometimes with that same showrunner for a different network or for a different studio, because it's about awareness.
And so the word of mouth in our communities is strong. And even though I might not hire you, if we had a great vibe and I love your work, I'm going to recommend you to everybody that I talk to who's like, hey, I'm looking for this, or hey, I'm working on this. That word of mouth is still such a huge part of our industry and how people get work, which can be great, but it also can make it feel more difficult to get access because it is so relationship based. So can we talk a little bit about training? How do I know if I can't, you know, get the engineering degree at USC School of Music? Especially for a lot of our library audience, they're here in LA County. There's so many amazing resources between LACC, Santa Monica City College, but they're also, you know, people always are asking me about Musicians Institute. Are they legit? Is that a good place to invest my money? Can you talk a little bit about your knowledge base? Are you hiring people? Do you recruit from those places, or where are the places that people need to know to avoid, if you have any insight on where to go to learn and where not to go to learn, if you have any insight on that?
I don't have a tremendous amount of insight in that area. I will say that we hire from all different areas. Not everyone has to be from USC Thornton School of Music. I am not a trained musician. I have no music skills at that level. I did not go to Berkeley. I wouldn't have gotten in, to be blunt. But again, that goes back to understanding what you want to do and looking at your own particular path and figuring out how best to get there. And this is important information. You're not going to start scoring the film. You're going to start getting coffee for the composer. You're going to
Yep.
start scoring that indie film that has no, budget. And you are going to fail many times, more often than, you're going to succeed. And you're going to have to pivot. And you're going to have to start here and end up there. And that's all really important. So specific things. I tell people there's a book which is like the holy grail of all music business stuff, and it's All You Need to Know About the Music Business by Donald Passman. It's been around for years. I believe he updates it every so many years, and I believe he recently updated with the advent of streaming and, Spotify and all that kind of stuff. I still refer to this book. It, I'm not a lawyer. I am, but I have to sometimes understand rights and music. And so just on the practical business side, having a Bible that you can go back to and be like, what is that again? How does that work again? Has been really helpful. I also encourage people to pay attention to the trades. You can, within the public library, get access to Billboard, Hollywood Reporter, Variety.
Is Music Connection still a thing?
Say again?
The Music Connection, is that still in publication? I don't know.
Sure
You guys look and see. There was a local publication. That's how we all shared our information. And you became a guitar player for your band, or you could post jobs or post I'm looking for. And it also covered like local gigs and local musicians and stuff like that. So sorry to jump in there, but if Music Connect is still around, that's right up that way.
I haven't seen it in a long time, but I don't know. I remember the magazine, but I don't remember if I haven't seen it in a long time.
Yeah.
I would also say guilds and unions are incredibly great resources.
Let's talk about the guilds and unions in our space, because it might be surprising to people. There are great union jobs in this space, but what is the question of outside of the musicians, the 47, are there any other areas that are covered by the unions, and how does that work?
So IOTC is, and I always forget what it stands for, so someone smarter than me can give exactly what the acronym stands for, covers music editors. Composers are not unionized. Music supervisors have begun a great guild called the Guild of Music Supervisors. And I bring that up because it was founded by the incredible Maureen Crow, who we both know. And she has done more for the job of music supervisor than probably anyone in the world. And, I recently, in the past year and a half, hired someone who was music supervisor, relatively new to some of our world, but she was a member of the guild, and it was a great resource for me to talk to other members who hadn't necessarily worked with her, but were like, hey, she's been on committees with us, she has incredible follow through, she is eager, she's smart, so I learned a lot about particular candidates that I was looking at through the guild, which is kind of interesting because it wasn't a job, it wasn't set up to be a job interview, but because we have such relationships there, yeah. It was a tool that I used to find out information.
I think it's really important that people learn the different unions and guilds. They all have new member representatives. There's always somebody that you can find on the website or just call and ask who the new membership person is. And it's really important from the jump to understand what is going to be required over the course of years to qualify to get into the union, to qualify to get into the guild, so that if you decide which area, you need to know what the goals are, so that as you're making your choices and opportunities as you grow your career, you're picking things that are going to qualify if having a union job is something that is an aspiration. Because if you work for 4 years and then find out, half these shows you chose don't qualify for the guild, you might have made different choices. So they're always really welcoming, even to cold calls. There's really great information on all of their websites. Look for the new member person and that you're interested in learning what to qualify. So I think people don't do that as much.
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, I want to go back also to the Array crew information. I'm not an expert on that database, but I believe you only need 1 credit
You
to get your
only
name
need
in
one
there.
credit. You do not need to be in the union yet, which some of the other crew positions are. And it is really all of the studios have made a commitment to get to recruit from there and to look at this crew list and make it available. And it's really, if you go to Array's website, there's information about how to submit yourself to be considered to be added to that crew list. And that crew list is being advocated around all of the big places as well as the bigger independent stores.
I would also encourage people to learn about ASCAP and BMI. Join them. They're performing rights organizations. If you were composers or songwriters, breaking in, that is, I know it's hard, and I know that it seems like an uphill battle, but I have also leaned on performing rights organizations in my career for introductions to people in specific genres that I did not have knowledge or
Really?
relationships in, and I didn't know where to go. And so instead of just saying, I don't know, like I called up ASCAP and I was like, do you have anyone? And these are worldwide, sometimes worldwide organizations, sometimes just domestic, but they all have arms. They all have like tentacles out there. And so I was looking for a very specific thing that was unique to a particular country. I didn't have access to it. I didn't know what to do. And so I called my friends at ASCAP and BMI, and they introduced me to new and emerging composers from this area. From there, I got some contacts that knew somebody who recorded in this particular country. And like, it just kind of, but that's what the gig is. And it's about doing the legwork to get there. But it also works on the other side. You have to do the legwork to get yourself in that position.
Absolutely. I one of the things to think about if you're coming into the space from performance or songwriting is the really encouraging thing is ASCAP and BMI all have tremendously expanded their film and television divisions, departments, and they've invested a tremendous amount of money to advocating, to creating engagements at the film festival and TV event space. So they run a songwriter showcase at Sundance, and they encourage all of us filmmakers to go. And they have discovery programs that they're spending a tremendous amount of money presenting composers and performers and songwriters at our events to help facilitate discovery from filmmakers to these things. And that seems to keep growing as well. The special projects is also an important job position that I think a lot of musicians need to know more about, because the special projects people are the ones that we contact first many times when we're going to wanting to shop music to a TV show. You're going to probably, or when I'm looking to license music, the special projects at each studio or each is kind of your first stop. So definitely check out and know who works well where, because a lot of the people, there aren't a lot of people that do that job, and they tend to bounce from place to place. So the network's really strong. So learn what a special projects department is, because it's really also a great entry point. Now that things are more virtual, there's more opportunity, even if you're not living in Hollywood. So if you're at Santa Monica, you're out in the Valley, you're in the OBC, there's still accessibility in a bigger way now, where you don't have to necessarily, live within the shadow of Paramount Studios to get access.
That's a great point. Yeah. Other avenues and things to talk about are also just familiarity with technology, Pro Tools, Logic, Nuendo. I'm not an expert at any of them, but right now Pro Tools is still pretty much the gold standard. But the fluency in those particular areas is essential to getting the next step in, particularly if you want a hands-on job. So
and there's several Sibelius and several composer softwares. What's the expectation when you hire somebody? What's a software that most, like that Netflix uses and you expect your composers, the shops to be using?
I would say, Pro Tools is the gold standard. We're not specific about mandating a particular work style until the end, and then the end, it's about uploading files.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's asset management gets involved and makes sure that, if a show is like 5.1, then it's delivered in 5.1. If it is surround or, Atmos or what have you. And all of this is changing. That's another interesting aspect of a job that is new to me. The asset management portion of our job is so essential. And there are people whose sole job it is to understand that Atmos and Dolby and all of these amazing companies are, developing software, and I'm going to say it all wrong because it's not my world, but like sound technology to improve the way music is consumed. And that's a job in and of itself. If you have like, I have a close friend who was first he was a player, then he was a music producer, and then he worked in, one of these companies for a very long time and, developed 5.1, and, had an understanding of this world, which is yet another avenue.
I love that. And I think also for people who don't come from the music space, I love bringing in people who have great logistical skills. If you were, every single one of these departments needs an organizational, producerial knowledge base. You don't necessarily have to know a lot about music. You can get exposed to that on the way. But if you're really great at producing, coming in and being able to get a job as a coordinator in a department is fantastic. And there are a lot of people who can come from outside of the business. Even if you did like event management, if you were coordinating a lot of logistics for weddings or live music events, if you've worked at like festivals, of wine and cheese festivals, people who work at music festivals really have a lot of the skill set that I think applies really well to the producing side of a lot of different music departments.
Absolutely. And I want to say that I didn't know that my job existed growing up. I was not exposed to music in this way. First of all, music supervision is a relatively new job. I mean, that started, I guess, in the 70s and in 80s becoming really popular. I sadly don't know exactly how it was done within studios, and I should, in the 30s and 40s. But what I do know is that I had no idea that I would end up where I am. Like, it wasn't something that I was like, hey, I want that kind of job, because I didn't know it existed. And the other thing, it didn't exist. Streaming, services were not in existence.
Nobody had said the word Napster at all, ever. That was going to end up changing the way, and Pro Tools, right? Like those two.
Well, that's actually another good book, How Music Got Free. That's another book that talks about digital music piracy and the changing music, business. So that's another great read. But anyway, the reason I bring that up is because I just I stumbled into a lot of this, and I can't, again, underestimate keeping your eyes open and being willing to pivot and follow your interests while simultaneously asking questions and making relationships. Because and I know that some people have asked, like, oh, how do we get in touch with you, and how can we get a job? But it isn't as simple as coming to me. Like, I think I can't say that enough. It's about building the network of professionals that you work with, so that when somebody is doing a show that's too big for them and they have a little extra work, they give you that work. And then the director hears that piece and wants more cues from that sound like that. And then those cues get in this show that I've heard and I love. And I'm working with a director who wants music that's similar to the vibe on that show. And I remember that you've worked on that, or you did some music for him. It is all about building. I'm not going to hire you. Like, I don't have that capacity. What I can do is further the relationship. You have to, I was going to say you have to hire yourself, but that's not what I meant. You have to be ready for that opportunity and be ready for that EP and that team to say,
Yeah. And so in line with that, the balance of what you're talking about is our job as artists, especially when we're breaking in, is to build our body of work and to build our relationships, so that when the opportunity comes to somebody like Colleen, she's hearing about you from 3 or 4 other people. as she's been able to see work that you've done, and you're not going to jump up. So as we look towards short film access points, independent film access points, find the people that are doing the work that touches your heart, that keeps you up at night. What are those 10 shows that you love? So you're not going to jump from apprentice, like get the apprentice job in the music shop for the composer that's doing the work on Secession is probably like the lane in a freeway that has the most traffic. So you got to be smart and look at what other shows that are smaller, digital shows, commercials, what has a lot more content that's doing similar style, and try to get internships and apprenticeships there. If everybody's all chasing the new Soprano series, there's all these other shows that are constantly looking for young, really talented, really dedicated people in-house. So find your access points in the other 12 lanes of the highway, because if everybody gets on the freeway and gets in the fast lane, you're all just sitting there looking at each other. But being able to find, I think people underestimate film festivals. We live in LA and there's a film festival around town every weekend. And now during COVID, all these festivals have online virtual components. Finding an opportunity in film and television starts with going to these festivals and finding the composers of those movies, because those are the people you can apprentice with, intern with, because many times they're on the mid-level of their career. And find the people that make stuff you love and jump on their boat then, and then grow with them, right? Also, it helps you learn what you don't like. It helps you learn being able to tell the difference about whose workflow works for you and whose doesn't, helps you figure out what kind of artist or what kind of executive you're going to be in these different music departments. And I'm really excited about this. Is the best time in the world to launch a career in these spaces, and the access to information both through LA County Library and Google is your friend. I'm just going to say it. And start your own stuff. I come from a space where I was at Disney. I did go to Thornton School of Music, and then I did get into the film school, and I did get a job at Disney, and I just kept getting opportunity. So I kept leaving, right? So I started, and then I got into film school. And so I changed my major. And then my second year of that, I got a job at Disney, and I left school and had the opportunity to PA on a show that was a musical, which made sense for them at the time. So you never know when that opportunity is going to come in, and how do you say yes to the unknown, or yes to, well, I'm not an expert at that yet. But if you're really smart about meeting Maureen Crow and seeing what she was doing, made me know I'm saying yes to this, even though I don't know if I can live on this money, and I can't believe I'm leaving college. But just a meeting with Maureen Crow changed my whole life and showed me somebody as a woman in a space I'd never seen a woman before, could connect the dot from my own background and knowledge to opportunity that, again, I had no idea I'd end up working in making film and television. I was a clarinet player. I was going to play Chicago Symphony. What did I know?
See, and I mean, that's amazing. I didn't go to college for music. I didn't take music lessons. I played in a punk rock band, and my experience was touch and feel. And you know how I got signed? We made a video in the garage of Rutgers.
Amazing.
My friend shot it, who was my manager, and we shot the video on the side of the New Jersey Turnpike. Yeah. We got in a van and we drove off the turnpike, and we all ran down the hillside, and we, did it DIY style. And then I made cassettes, and I sent cassettes out because I'm so old. They were cassettes, not 8-tracks, so no jokes. No. But seriously, like, it was my journey was very DIY. It was like.
And the great thing about that, and even more so when we started out, when I'm looking for those parts of the creative process for what we're making, at no point do I care where your background was. I don't care if you went to school or not. I don't care if you've been in juvie. I don't care. Like, I think those experiences in life that we maybe feel like we need to cover up is what makes you more interesting as an artist to me, or understanding the scene that I'm trying to put on the screen and connect emotionally with my audience. So there's no barrier to entry. Nobody cares that if you've finished high school. Like, nobody, if you have the skill set and you have the work ethic and you really have a passion for emotionally creating moments that help us connect to our audiences, that, and that you're found ways to find great mentors that could teach you up, that's the definition of how you get hired or not. Are you making music, or are you a great supervisor that has great instincts about how to reach out into the world and find music I never have heard of, or artists that are new? That's what gets me excited about working with somebody. And so don't let your own self-doubt, and don't build the barrier to entry that doesn't exist anymore, because none of us are coming. That's not the value set when we're looking to hire people we want to collaborate with.
That's an incredible piece of advice. I mean, that is, don't create your own barriers. I mean, if anything you take away from this today, I think that's probably the most poignant, because we all do it and we shouldn't. I do it myself. I do it all the time, even now, and we don't want to be our worst enemies. And I'm also going to share something that I look for when I'm hiring. And I read about it. It's not my own original idea, but it has served me well. Our business is about serving creatives, and I often ask people if they've ever been a waitress or a waiter or worked in the service industry. I find that skill set, I worked as a waitress for a long time, and more than my internships, more than my education, sometimes more than even my like big successful moments, I pull back to moments when I was a waitress and had to figure out how to serve with the situation, and serve with a smile, listen to what was being asked of me. And that knowledge, whew, I use it all the time. And
such a great analogy, because it is so similar to somebody ordering something, and then when it comes, they claim they didn't order that and they want something different. And you have to be like, oh, of course, no problem. It is so spot on, because it's exactly what huge parts of my day are.
right?
It's not about arguing. It's not about being right. It's about getting this person what they need, even if they said something different yesterday.
Creative, right? I mean,
yeah. So, man, that's nil. And I think it is. It's a huge part of skill set, but I also think our personality. Like, some people are really, I don't enjoy parts of the process to be in a room alone. I love the collab. I love the team sport part. But for people who love to work individually, there's so many parts of this business on the music side that work well for self-starters, people who can get a lot of stuff done without a lot of team. This is a really great space for people who work really well independently. There's so many different jobs in that space that are both creative and production oriented. I love it. So as we start to wrap this up, you've talked about so much great information. Talk about, if you were mentoring and you were bringing in your own apprentice or your own intern, what are the qualifications that pop out at you when you get excited about bringing somebody in and helping nurture them? What is it about their skill set or the way that they present what they want? What about their personal narrative that helps you? What makes somebody sparkle to you, that this is somebody who has a lot of the elements that's going to make them successful in music production?
I think passion is incredible. I think people that want the gig really want it, not just want the gig so that they can be vice president tomorrow, but really want to learn, like enjoys the process, enjoys learning, has a passion for music or organization or both. I look for strong communicators. I look for people that can understand context. And this is the biggest thing that I impart to people that work for me or work with me. I'm like, I need more context on this. Go back and ask these questions so that you gain context. Make sure when you're providing information that you give a, contextual awareness to whomever you're talking to. It's basically understanding what the job is, because the job can be a different thing at any given moment.
Yeah.
Right. So what else do I look for? Depending on what I'm hiring, I look for people that have good taste. And good taste can mean different things. It doesn't have to be my taste. It certainly shouldn't be my taste more often than not, because I have my taste. What I need is your taste. So that's really important to me. I look for people that have a different worldview than me, because again, I have my worldview. I know what an old punk rocker listens to, but what I need to know. What'd you say? I'm sorry.
You know what you know.
Yeah, I mean, what I need is what you know. I need to know a difference in worldview. I need to know about different styles of music that I don't listen to. I need to know that you have your ear to the ground. I particularly like to hire people that go to shows, because I don't go to shows as often now. I have a child. I prefer to be home and putting her to bed rather than, going out and waiting in line. And so I want ear to the ground. I want people that are into new technology, into new bands.
Great.
They like to go to concerts. They like to go to festivals. They like to go to music festivals. I like people that have friends in the industry, because you learn from our peers. We all talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I'll be honest, I don't TikTok, but it's so important when I'm going in to know who they're talking about. These references are coming up more and more. Who's the new Justin Bieber going to be, the branching out and popping off of YouTube? To me, it's still so foreign, but it's real and it's here. And that's such a benefit from the young people in our circle, that I expect them to be able to find what's up. And to me, it's not the existing knowledge base, it's the ability to know. Right. I love the answer. I don't know, but let me find out and get back to you is my favorite answer. Nobody works for me very long who always has the answer, because I know you don't. But I love, let me look into that. There's blah, 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 these resources, and I can go and find out. I get really excited when I love collaborating with people who have that mindset about things.
Yeah. I mean, a big part of my job that we didn't discuss too is research and development. Like sometimes we don't know what we want. And so I have to go out and I have to research bands that are, from a particular genre or world or country, or, and so I'm constantly learning as well. And so I'm with you. I don't buy when people are like, oh, this is who you need to hire. And it's the same. What you start to discover
without, it might be written as blues, but we might find out that jazz and come neo soul jazz is going to work a lot better, but we won't know until we lay it in and play it for the director. So having that didactic thing limits creative discovery, which is key to success for us.
I'm gonna leave one thought with everyone, and I think it's really important. It's about failure and about doing things, like being proactive and doing things. Like we all talk about creating music and putting out on SoundCloud, or in my day it was like creating a fanzine or a cassette tape. I can't tell you how many creative things I did that failed, and so often people are like, well, I created a YouTube channel and nobody, or I scored this and nobody's watching or nobody listened. That's going to happen. You're going to fail. You are going to fail and fail and fail. And you can't let that stop you if what you want to do is be creative. Failure is an essential part of the creative process. And I can't stress that enough. And I know it sounds maybe silly and unclear, but maybe everyone listening will come to understand the value in in that statement that failure is essential to the creative process, because you will learn more from failing than you will from succeeding. You will make great relationships. You will learn about what not to do or how to do it better. It is so essential. I just can't say that enough.
That's amazing. Thank you. It's such a perfect beat to wrap this up on. Thank you, everybody. I'm just going to put a little coda on here. Jonah, I see your information. I would love to speak to you and give you some insight. And I love that you spoke up for yourself. And so for right now, you can always pass along messages to me, either through Caroline, or our Instagram is Hollywood Shorts, all one word. And we've opened up our DMs for you guys to be able to reach out. And I will answer what I can in the time as fast as I can. But Jonah, I want you to reach out to my Instagram immediately, and we will look up some avenues and we'll learn what school you're at, because there might be resources out and around your school. So welcome to the US. And I guarantee there's a lane for you, and we can get you some hands-on that'll help put your feet on the right path. So thank you you made the right choice. Is just signing up and being here today, Jonah, was the first step that you took to creating your own yes. I love it. I'm so excited about that.
And I have something that I can share too, if I can figure out how to do it. Oh no, I'm not sure this is
if you
right.
Chat, and then make sure it says send to everyone.
Okay, send to everyone. Let me make sure I'm doing this correctly. Give me a second. I'm going to give you an area in which you can send files to Netflix.
Great.
Now listen, the thing about this is that you can send us music here. We have people that listen to things. Here you go. Hopefully that works.
Amazing.
You can upload music here. So, we don't take submissions unsolicited submissions wide, but if there are, particular areas where you have, like records or things that are published, but unsolicited stuff, I want to be clear that we don't have the bandwidth. We also don't have the legalities to do that, but this is something that you can share and put, upload music to.
I love it. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us today. Caroline's going to jump back in. Colleen, thank you so much. I hope you hear all the audience applause virtually that we share to you. Thank you for taking the time and the interest in encouraging and inspiring our audiences. So thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you, Kimberly. Bye, Caroline.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you all enjoyed the program. There was so much activity in the chat. So thank you everyone for chatting with us and sharing about your personal kind of music backgrounds and journeys and what you're looking for. I was super excited and into the conversation today. So thank you to both of you, Colleen and Kimberly. If you want to explore more about the topics we discussed today, we will be emailing out a list of resources and a link to the recording of the presentation to everyone who registered. So all the links I was putting in the chat, as well as more, I will send a document, so you don't have to worry about remembering any of it. So our next Creative Career Paths event will be on Saturday, November 20th, same time, and will feature costume designer Derica Cole Washington. If you want to learn more about the series itself or see past recordings and past resource lists, visit lacountylibrary.org/creative-career-paths. I'll put that in the chat. And if you have any ideas about other kinds of professions you want to see featured as a part of this series in the future, please share it with us. I'm going to be emailing you all the links and the resources, and you can always respond back to me with more questions or suggestions or ways to reach out. So, and if you're interested in participating in more of our upcoming virtual programs, please visit us at lacountylibrary.org. Have an amazing weekend, everybody.